Hi, my name is Radia, and today I'll be covering the top 10 worst events in US history. Number one, I think, is obviously the day Mr. Schaefer was born. The Mexican American War is comparable to two little kids fighting over a toy, but in this case, it's Mexico and the US fighting over Texas. Instead of being civilized and talking it out, they went into war. They fought over Texas because Texas decided to be independent, but Mexico still considered it their land. When the US butted in and tried to claim Texas in 1845, they pretty much just acted shocked when Mexico got so angry about it. The US wanted to be greedy by wanting more land and believing in something called Manifest Destiny. Manifest Destiny was just people having the idea that God sent them to collect land. The war ended with Mexico losing a big part of its land, which is now known as California and Arizona. This war was one of the worst events in my opinion because the US and Mexico were very immature, and the whole situation just sounds like complete bogus. Honestly, I don't think the Boston Tea Party was a bad event. I just believe the colonists protested in the most insane way possible. Pretty much what happened was that the colonists were so upset about British tea taxes that they snuck onto ships and dumped over 46 tons of tea into the Boston Harbor. Britain obviously got irritated from this, which frankly helped escalate things into starting the American Revolution. I think this is one of the worst events in US history because what do you mean they started an entire revolution because of tea? The Salem witch trials took place in 1692. The people of Salem started to accuse young girls of being witches because they had tantrums. Girls back then were expected to be perfect, and if they weren't, they were witches. They then were murdered for witchcraft. I feel like this was a terrible event in US history because not only was it complete baloney, nobody really thought of other conclusions. The Trail of Tears was basically when our former president, Andrew Jackson, saw the Native Americans, specifically the Cherokee, and thought, I think we should steal their land and make these innocent people leave their homes. They then kicked the Native Americans out and forced them to walk thousands of miles west in horrible conditions. I think this event was one of the worst because the whole thing was cruel and insanely unfair, all because President Jackson cared more about money and land than human lives. The US randomly decided in the 1500s that they could just treat human beings like cargo on a ship. Africans were stolen from their homes and were thrown into a cramped boat where disease and starvation caused many deaths. When they arrived to their destination, they were forced to work unpaid, non-stop with very minimal break time. Their families were often separated and they had absolutely no freedom. The system was built entirely on cruelty. It lasted until the 1800s when President Abraham Lincoln wrote the Emancipation Proclamation. I really do think that this is one of the worst events in US history because it involves suffering of millions of slaves for profit for over hundreds of years. Boston Massacre was basically the moment when American colonists and British soldiers went bonkers. In 1770, the colonies were mad because Britain kept taxing them. Their solution? Throw rocks at soldiers. The soldiers panicked and shot this 11-year-old kid, which was pretty much the breaking point of the massacre. It started off as a chaotic little scuffle and then escalated into a deadly fight really fast. This became one of the worst moments in US history because it shows how much the colonies hated the British and pushed us closer to the revolution. The founding of Jamestown was generally England's attempt at starting a new life and then completely failing at it because they didn't think anything through. They wanted to get rich and died. Why? Because they picked a germy swamp with no food and didn't even farm. Anyways, they died of sickness and starvation. The colony would also constantly argue with the Native American groups because they decided to take land and resources for that little time that they lived, and obviously, the natives didn't like that. I feel like this had to be on the list of the worst events because it showed how stupid the settlers were back then. It also resulted in years of suffering for both indigenous people and new settlers. This war was just Britain and France having an argument over land in North America and just dragging other countries in it. The fighting has started because both of them were hungry for more land. Britain eventually won the war and took a lot of land. But although they won, Britain was in insane debt. To get rich again, they started taxing the colonists. This event deserves to be up here because it was the cause of many upcoming events and led Britain to tax the colonies, which made more problems in America. The Lewis and Clark expedition was supposed to be some big adventure to explore land in the West, but also caused a ton of problems for Native Americans, one of which was stealing one of their people. Even though this event was treated as a heroic thing, it really wasn't. Sacagawea traveled with them while really young, and was mainly just used as a tool to help with the expedition. She translated for everyone and basically guided the group in extremely dangerous places, all while pregnant. The Lewis and Clark expedition was a bad event in history because the expedition just used Sacagawea and her knowledge to help America take even more indigenous land. Christopher Columbus, the power and money-hungry jerk, also known as the dude who discovered America, caused so many problems for indigenous people. When Columbus went to Spain in 1492, he and his men stole land and forced natives to work, and overall treated them terribly while searching for gold and power. The Queen had literally told Columbus not to cause chaos and just to befriend the natives and convert them to Christianity. But he didn't listen. Instead, he just enslaved them because if they were baptized, they couldn't be slaves. He loved punishing them, and his favorite way was to cut off people's limbs. People even preferred to take their own lives rather than go through Columbus' punishments. A lot of books made it seem like Columbus was super heroic and just breezing past his terrible actions towards the Native Americans. I chose him as one of the worst possible things to happen in history because all he did was show up, torture innocent people, and then leave.